Bezat Hashem, today in Masechet Shabbat, we are starting about halfway down on Gimel Amud Bet. Bezat Hashem, we're going to get to Mem Daled Amud Aleph, more than halfway down the page, Bezat Hashem. Now, today we're going to have three sections. The first is going to be a proof that Rav Huna's teaching is going to be to Rav Yitzchak that we had yesterday, about Asur L'Taltel, Davar Mutar L'Tzorech Davar Asur B'Shabbat. That's what we're going to bring a proof. Rav Huna is going to teach us something we're going to see. That's a raya to something that Rav Yitzchak taught us yesterday, to his shita, where he was cholek on Rav Chizda. That's the first point we'll see.
It's like Rabba, it's like Rabba, but without...
Exactly.
Matzui.
Exactly.
And then מבטל דבר מחנו.
1 second.
אז רב יצחק זה לצורך מקומו.
The second section we're going to deal with here is how to deal with a dead body on Shabbat. A person lo aleinu dies on Shabbat and it's in the sun. You don't want it to spoil. Like it's very similar. We're going to have a similar story. And then the last section we're going to deal with, which is very interesting, that we had learned in the Mishnah, you're not allowed to benefit from the oil of the fire on Shabbat. So we're going to see, this brings entirely new machloket and discussion. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, it gets into that machloket about muktzeh, in terms of benefiting from the oil, moving the candle, all these things will come into play then. Now before we start, let's just remember what we're holding over here. We had really two major shitot, and then within those two shitot, we had two explanations within Rav Chizda. If you remember yesterday, this is what we've been talking about the last 2 days. Rav Chizda held that there's a chiluk if you're allowed to put a kli to catch the beitzah, the egg that is laid by the hen, or to cover the egg. He said you're allowed to put a basket to cover the egg, but not to catch the egg. So we had Rabba and we had Rav Yosef as to why. But then we had Rav Yitzchak who's cholek on Rav Chizda. And Rav Yitzchak said, Kishem shasur, to put the basket to catch the egg, it's also asur to cover the egg. Why? Because he held you're not allowed to move davar nital letzorech davar asur, muktzeh. That's what he held. And he didn't hold of the kula of Rabba, which we're just saying, which is davar matzui. Doesn't hold of that. So we're picking up today, the Gemara is going to bring a proof to support Rav Yitzchak, that we're going to see from this psak of Rav Huna, that you're not allowed to move something that's mutar letzorech davar asur. That's what we're going to see. Let me just explain outside what we're about to see, because it's a very unique case. We have a story like this, chas v'shalom lo aleinu. Someone passes away outside in the sun. There's a dead body in the sun. Now you don't want the dead body to stay in the sun. You want it to be in shade, because it's in the sun, it starts to putrefy, it starts to rot. It's not kavod amet. Okay. So what do you want to do?
You can cover it.
Oh, you want to cover it? Okay, either you could cover it. You want it to be in shade. So either you could cover it or you could bring it to a place that's shady. Either way.
But we spoke about it before, I think, that you actually take something that is
excellent.
Excellent. So you can put like a bread.
Beautiful. Something that's not muktzeh.
Bread or baby, and
beautiful.
You move the body.
So that's going to be the next section. We'll get to that. That's going to be another eitzah we'll see. But here, the eitzah that the Rav Huna is going to give is figure out how to make an ohel over it wherever it is.
But it's going to cause...
But now you have two problems. One issue is it's boneh, because if you build something over it, it's building an ohel as boneh. That's one thing. The other problem is you're taking the items to make that litzoech the body, which is muktzeh.
You're taking the items litzoech the body.
You understand? The body is muktzeh because there's no use for it, and the whatever you're using to cover it now is taking davar anita litzoech davar muktzeh. So that's a problem. So how do you get around these two problems? So Rav Huna gives a very ingenious solution how to avoid both of these problems.
This is the yeshina shel oil harai.
Okay, so first of all, we have to make a chiluk between that in a minute. But it's a solution how to avoid both problems, and you could still build something around the met. So let me just tell you. Midoraita, oil kavua is considered an oil. It means when you build a covering, a tent, etc., it's only if it's kavua, it's midoraita. Rabanan, arai, meaning if it's a temporary tent, so that would be a problem. I was thinking, when you play with your kids and you build with the cushions, like I was thinking about, I wonder what the deal is exactly, because you're going to see this almost like what we're about to show over here.
But in order to, it has to go like that. in order to be chayav.
It's like table with a tablecloth. It's called ma'il, no?
So it's like this. Listen good. So the issur de rabbanan of oil arai is not the oraita, but it would be boneh, is where you build it kederech habonim. What's kederech habonim? First you build walls and then you build a roof.
So you do the opposite.
So Rav Huna is going to give an eitzah how you could first build a roof and then build walls.
Yes.
So he says like this. Here's how you're going to get around both problems. What you're going to do is like this. Two people are going to go sit outside next to the dead body, and then they're going to be hot because the sun on the floor makes them uncomfortable. So what they're going to do is, for themselves, they're now going to have to bring out for themselves beds, the mitah, it says mitot. They're going to bring something to sit on, okay, under themselves, next to the dead body. Then, because they're sitting in the sun, they're going to be mitzta'er from the sun, themselves, so then they're going to be allowed to bring for themselves some sort of a mat to cover themselves and to cover the dead body.
It's not melechet machshevet?
What's melechet machshevet? Do any melacha?
Because he's
out in the sun, he wants to cover himself. That's not a problem. Hold on.
Your intention
hold on. Now they're holding the coverage over themselves and the dead body. Nothing issur was done yet. There's no problem. Now what they're going to do is, if they want to slip away, they don't have to stay there. They can put their beds, straighten the beds so that it acts as a wall, and then they could walk away.
And then you have a roof.
And then you have a roof that was created before the walls, which is not even an issur d'Rabbanan. Again, really, l'chatchila, you wouldn't necessarily be allowed to do this because kavod hamet, you're allowed to do this, which is a loophole to circumvent the issue. The reason we're bringing this whole story in is to show the psak is like Rav Yitzchak, that you're not allowed usually to take something that's mutar l'tzorech davar asur, and that's why in this case, first they have to be mitzta'er themselves in order to bring out the mat, in order to bring out the beds. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to bring it outright for the dead body. Beautiful. That's the raya we're going to bring. Let's see it inside.
So, 1 second, Rabbi. Can you clarify again?
Let's read it inside.
Right.
Let's read it inside and then we'll speak it out again. Amar lahu Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet said to the students, Huku ve'imru leila Rav Yitzchak. Go tell Rav Yitzchak. Rav Yitzchak was in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Sheshet was in Bavel. So he said, go tell Rav Yitzchak, Rav Huna already explained your teaching in Bavel. Means a psak of Rav Huna in Bavel supports your teaching of Yitzchak in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said like this: you're allowed to make a cover for a dead person because of a living person, but you can't make it only outright for the dead person. Amahi, what does it mean? They taught the following. If there's a dead person who's in the sun. Now, we're talking about where it's not like a Reshut Harabim. That would be a tiltul problem. It's in the chatzer. It's in a private area. So it's in the sun. So ba'im shnei bnei adam. Two people come. V'yoshvim b'tzido. They sit next to the dead body. Now, why is that important? Because as they're sitting on the ground, they start to get uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable now. So cham lehem milmata, when it's hot for them on the floor. Now, that's not a tiltul. You're not taking davar nita letzoech muktzeh. They're taking it for themselves, which is completely permissible. So far, so good. And they sit on these beds. Cham lehem milmala, then afterwards it starts to feel hot above them, meaning they're feeling hot. So they could bring mats and cover themselves with it, a sheet, cover themselves with it. Now, in covering themselves, they're also going to cover the dead body. It means it's going to cover all three of them, really.
So,
1 second. Then one of them is allowed to stand up. He wants to go. He wants to take a bathroom break. So what he's allowed to do is a loophole, obviously. He could stand up the bed so it supports the cover above them, which is that you built the walls after the roof.
You build the
walls after the roof. That's why it's actually not even boneh, really, the building in Ohel. The Rabbanan really
it's not there at all.
Exactly.
What do you do with the mattress?
And the other one can do the same thing. And it turns out the cover was made by itself, and this is a proof that, again, to take the mattresses or to take the cover outright for the dead person, which is muktzeh, that you're not allowed to do. But in order to avoid that problem, you take it for yourself and then you use it for them in a way that the binyan is not a problem. So this is a proof to support Rabbi Yitzchak. What's your question?
How is okay the mita? I don't get it.
No, just
flip it.
You know when you were a kid and you built out of cushions, you built like houses out of cushions.
This is like this, and it's
yeah. Figure it out. Use your imagination. Meaning, beforehand it was on the ground. And you just flip it, beautiful. And now you have a cushion.
First of all, they covered.
So first they were holding a coverage. Now what they're going to do is, okay, I need to go to the bathroom. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to flip the beds on their sides or upright. Either way, it doesn't make a difference. However it's going to stand. And then you could leave it that way throughout Shabbat so that the body doesn't spoil. Meaning, and then you could stay like that throughout Shabbat. And Motzei Shabbat, you take care of it. Now your Eitzah, by the way, to move the body, we're going to get to in a minute. But we just wanted to bring this psak to show you're not allowed to take davar nita letzorech davar asur. That's why you needed the whole Eitzah, which is take it for yourself, and memela it'll be used for that. For the
it's like the same thing with Rav Yitzchak, lemkomo.
Exactly.
Because
exactly.
I need this space, so I use it. I'm allowed to use it, but.
Me'achuz. Good? Clear?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. What?
Yeah.
It's a good solution, right? Okay. Tosfot just points out, if you look at the second to last Tosfot, Nishmat v'olech lo. What?
Rashi.
There's a long Rashi on this, yeah. Rashi just said, Rashi goes through, we'll see in a minute. But Nishmat v'olech lo, Tosfot says, ואין צריך להישאר שם תחת האוהל כדי שיהיה נראה שנעשה בשביל חי, כיוון דבשעת העשייה היה נראה שעושה בשביל חי. He says, they don't have to stay there, because Tachlis, they showed at the time that they put the beds there, put the cover there, that it was for themselves, and therefore it's not a problem moving forward. They don't actually have to remain there. Rashi goes through the whole point of boneh, which he says is boneh midrabanan would be issur if you first build the walls and then the roof, which is derech b'niyah. That's the way to build. But here where you put the roof and then the walls, that would not be a problem of boneh. Okay, that's allowed. Now again, this l'chaora would be allowed for covering a dead body. Good? Tov, Yochai.
Beautiful.
Let's go ahead. Let's continue here. Okay. Now the Gemara moves on. Rav Huna. Now let's move on. Now we're going to get to really what Matan was saying, which is a new point, but it's just about covering or taking care of dead bodies on Shabbat. Itmar. Meta mutal bechama. If a dead body is in the sun on Shabbat. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, ofcho mimita lemita. What you're allowed to do is flip it from bed to bed until it gets to the shade. So what does it mean? It's somewhere out there. Now you're not allowed to pick up the dead body directly. It's muktzeh. It's muktzeh. So what are you supposed to do? What you could do is take beds, stack two beds, put one bed next to it and another bed next to that. Flip it onto the one bed, and then flip it from that onto the other bed. There is a machloket here I just want to point out.
What about the
right. So there is a discussion here if you could physically move it like that, or if you actually have to move it like that, meaning not. One second, let me just make sure I got that right. Let me just make sure. I believe it's a machloket rishonim. If you're allowed to move it physically, or you actually have to flip it using the bed. Yeah. So that's like the. Which meaning you can't actually touch it. Very interesting. I believe I saw other rishonim say you could actually physically move the body. Because I hear what you're saying. It sounds a little bit like bizayon amit. It does sound like it. I agree. But I guess it's less of a bizayon, so it's not sitting in the sun.
Oh, see,
that's the pshat.
It's a big when the person start to die,
right.
Especially a person that was sick,
right.
Was munsham,
right.
Was
right.
with it's really right away. Even before it started to smell.
So I guess that's why it would be.
I was once, fortunately.
Right. But I guess that's why it would be. It's not bizayon amit, meaning it's better that they're not in the sun, even though it's not nice, but it's better. That's the itzah. Yeah. I hear. No, it's not that pleasant, that's for sure. So itmar again, meta mutal bechama. So you flip it from bed to bed, and then again you shift the beds one after the other. You just keep shifting one after the other until it gets to a place of shade. That's Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. That's Shmuel's opinion. So in the name of Rav it was said, that's Shmuel's bar plukta. So he says, like Matan was saying, which we found, remember the Chachamim said about David HaMelech, they said you put something on the dead body so that now the dead body is a basis for something that's not muktzeh, and now you can move it based on the item that's not muktzeh, the child or the loaf of bread. Now, the Gemara explains exactly what is this machloket? So, Echa de'ika kikar tinok, where there is something that's not muktzeh. By the way, it's just an example. It doesn't have to be kikar tinok. Anything that's not muktzeh, they're allowed
Anything
to move.
that I have a need for.
It's not muktzeh, it's mukhan, right? So where you have those items, kulei amalo pligi deshari, that's the best thing. Do that. That's mutar. That's the ideal thing to do.
But what about vodamet?
Again, it's
You
in the
carry
sun. You
the
understand?
bread, you're using the mat
Again, but
as a
the
basis for something that
the
I
point
need.
is, it's worse that it's sitting in the sun right now. It's going to spoil. You don't want that to be. So it's better to do something that's a little bit not nice, just so that it's not in the sun. That's the point. So ki pligi, when is there a machloket between Shmuel and Rav? Deletle. It's talking about where you don't have the non-muktzah item, right? Whatever the reason is, you don't have it. That's where there's a machloket. Do you have an eitzah of flipping the body like we spoke about? Now, Mar Savar, Rav holds tiltul minatzad shmei tiltul. Move literally means moving from the side is called tiltul. Now, what does that mean? Moving in a way that's not a normal way to move things is also called tiltul.
Why?
So therefore,
We know
so that's okay, good. It's machloket. Rav holds moving in the non-normal way is still a problem of tiltul, and therefore you're not allowed to move it from bed to bed. The only eitzah is to put the non-muktzah item on it, and then to move it outright like that.
So the מת become בסיס לדבר המותר.
Right.
So the מת become בסיס לדבר המותר.
I mean, we'll get more into it later, but
והוא
that seems
בטל
to be.
לדבר המותר.
But that's Rav doesn't hold you could do that.
Because usually it's the opposite.
Rav doesn't hold that. But Umar Savar and Shmuel holds lo shmei tiltul. No. Moving it in the non-ordinary way, in the roundabout way, is not considered tiltul. So memela, you could flip it from bed to bed. That is an eitzah, and therefore, if you don't have the non-muktzah item, this is the eitzah that's able to be.
That's
done.
in case I don't have דבר המותר.
I just want to point out, this whole discussion seems to be because we're talking about a dead body, which is kavod amet. You need to move it. In general, to use this tiltul minatzad just outright, it's not a flat heter to use whenever you want to move muktzeh. It doesn't work that way. Specifically here, lechvod amet, and because of kavod abriot, we have a concept to take care of it. That's why you're allowed to employ this. B'derech klal, you're not allowed to. That's the point. Yeah. What do you want to say?
I'm asking. That's only if there is not some דבר המותר on it.
You don't have
just
it.
to move the dead body.
There's no דבר מותר.
From one place to place,
from one bed to another.
רב סובר שאסור.
זה גם נקרא טלטול, exactly. And Shmuel says, no, that's not called טלטול, so you're allowed to do that. Now the Gemara says, lema ketanai. Let's say that Rav and Shmuel are Amoraim. But let's say there's actually an earlier machloket Tanaim on the same topic. We're going to show, actually, there was a machloket Tanaim that seems to reflect the same machloket. What does it say in the Braita? It says, Ein matzilin et hamet mipnei adleika. Lo aleinu, there's a fire in the house, and also in the house is a dead body. Okay? There's a fire in the house, right? And also in the house, there's a dead body. Now, usually you're not allowed to move a dead body, but there's a fire. So says the Tanakama, Ein matzilin et hamet mipnei adleika. You're not allowed to move the dead body to get it out of the burning house. Very interesting. But it's muktzeh, so but at the same time, kavod abriot, say move it. You're not allowed to move.
But in this case, there is no such a thing.
Hold on, let's see. That's Tanakam. Amr Rav Yehuda ben Lakish. Rav Yehuda ben Lakish argues. Pay attention. Shamati, I heard that you are allowed to save it from the fire. So now you have a machloket Tanaim. Are you allowed to save a dead body from a burning house? Machloket Tanaim. So Echidami says the Gemara. Well, what's the case? What are we talking about here? If there is something that's not muktzeh, like we said, the problem is my time to the Tanakama. Why can't you save the dead body? We already said if you're dealing with a situation where there is a non-muktzeh, put it on the item and move the dead body. It's fine. Why would the Tanakama say you're not allowed to? And ideleka, and if it's talking about you don't have the non-muktzah item, so my time to Rav Yehuda ben Lakish, why does Rav Yehuda ben Lakish say you're allowed to move the dead body? So what must be the case? It must be, the machloket here really is tiltul minatzad. You're going to take the body out in a non-normal type of way, like say bed to bed, for example, and that's the machloket. The mar savar tiltul minatzad shmei tiltul. That Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish old, it's still considered carrying, and therefore, 1 second.
Mar savar it's Rav, or Mar is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish?
Mar, the Tanakama. סובר
סליחה, הסכם.
מן הצד נחלקו בו. מה אומר?
Mar savar tiltul min hatzad, shmei tiltul. Tanakama holds it's still considered carrying to do tiltul min hatzad, and that would come out like which of the Amoraim? Tiltul min hatzad, shmei tiltul. That's going to come out like Tanakama is going to come out like which of the Amoraim? It's going to come out like Rav, like Rav. You're not allowed to do tiltul min hatzad. The only thing you're allowed to do is betinok or bepat, right? That you're not allowed. That's what it would appear. Umar savar lo shmei tiltul. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish holds it's not considered tiltul, and that's why he said Ani shamati shematzilin. Why shamati shematzilin? Mean to say that you're allowed to do tiltul min hatzad. So the Gemara is trying to say like this. It will come out that the machloket Amoraim is really reflected earlier in a machloket Tanaim.
With who is in machloket Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish?
Tanakama.
Oh.
Meaning the Tanakama just means whoever the first opinion was. Listen, that doesn't say who it is. Fine. But then it would come out the machloket Amoraim is really machloket Tanaim. Now, why is that not such an ideal thing to do? We don't want to do that.
To what?
לא רוצים להגיד שהמחלוקת המוראים באמת זה קשור למחלוקת תנאים שהיו לפניהם. למה לא רוצים להגיד את זה?
Because you're putting two different situations here. There is like
one second. You're making a chiluk already, but why don't you even want to say it's the same machloket?
למה לא?
So usually, if there was a machloket tanaim that already existed, Rav and Shmuel wouldn't say their own shitot ki'ilu it's a new shita. They would say, "Ani sover ke Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, va'ani sover ke Tanakama." So therefore, we'd rather not say it's a machloket that was based on an earlier machloket, but rather it was a new machloket.
Why? What's that?
Because again, if Rav... Exactly. If Rav really held, let's say like we're coming out here, Rav's the Amora, he's later. So if he really held Tiltul min hatzad, Shmei Tiltul, it comes out that he holds like the Tanakama in this Braita, he should have said, Ani sover ki Tanakama. And Shmuel should have said, Ani sover ki Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish.
It's not the same
but they didn't say that. That's the point. So it must be that they really aren't arguing in the same machloket of the previous generation. It's so what's the difference?
Otherwise, they were saying
he's not going to make up as if they're new. No, it could be they didn't know the Braita, but usually if they're the same, so therefore what's the chiluk? So let's talk about the two cases.
This is proof. They actually do new machloket.
That's why usually when they'll say lemaket tanai, so the Gemara, no, it's not a machloket tanai. And why is the Gemara wanting to do that?
Let's prove that their machloket is not the same machloket was.
So they say it's not. So why is it not? Let's talk about the two cases. Met is bachama, and the second one, which is the machloket tanaim, is la'atzil min adleika. Machloket tanaim. That's the machloket tanaim. So what's the difference between the two?
Tanaim, you say it's a...
Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish and Tanakama are Tanaim. It's a Braita. So what's the difference between the two cases?
Big difference.
And Kuvod Amet.
Why? It's going to burn in the fire.
There's machloket.
What's the difference?
Sakanat nefashot?
Because...
What's sakana? The guy's dead. It's not sakana.
If you're going to carry him outside from the burning house, you are in sakanat nefashot.
No, not about you, about the met.
You're not. Leave it there.
We spoke about it once. I think that if there is a fire in the house, you might end up extinguish the
Excellent,
fire.
Beautiful. Yeah. What do you want to say, Yochai? Yeah, it's Mamash what Gemara's going to say. What do you want to say?
Because I think so. The difference is the first machlok is when it's in a shemesh. Even if you don't move it, after Moshe Shabbat, you still you have the body. But if you let it burn,
okay, that's interesting.
Maybe it's too late already.
But then why would the Tanakhama say you can't move it? It's worse. It's worse, meaning it comes out worse. So let's see. Says the Gemara.
You can't move it when it's in the leka.
You can't move it.
מה שמתן אמר,
right?
על איסור דאורייתא של כיבוי, וזה בעיה.
So says the Gemara, no, it's not the same machloket. Means דכולי עלמא תלתו מן הצד שמי תלתו. It could be that both Tanaim, meaning Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, tiltul min hatzad shmei tiltul, which means they would hold if it's in the sun, you're not allowed to do this tiltul min hatzad. You're not allowed to move it from bed to bed. They would hold like that. So why is he cholek then in the Braita when the house is burning? So why? V'hainu time in Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish. Now we understand Tanakama, you can't do tiltul min hatzad because it's shmei tiltul. But why does Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish say by dleika you're allowed to move it? Demitoch she'adam ba'ul al meito yisod. Because since a person is overwhelmed, he's what's the better word? Baul. He's completely.
He's not really focused.
He's not thinking properly. So then, what's going to happen is Mem Daled Amud Aleph. Ilo sharit aleh. If we weren't makil in the halachot muktzeh atilech buye. So what might end up happening is he'll do the issur d'oraita of kibui. Means he'll put out the fire to save the dead body. His imagine his relative lo aleinu. We never should know such a thing. But he'll put out the fire. So to avoid the issur d'oraita, according to Rav Yehuda ben Lakish, the Chachamim said you could take the body out. By the way, there's a machloket in the Rishonim here, I believe. In this case, does he still need to do tiltul min atzad? Or in this case, according to Rav Yehuda ben Lakish, is he able to just take the body? I mean, it's a very interesting thing.
I think so, take the body.
An interesting thing. But the way we're coming out is, both Tanaim would hold, if it's in the sun, no, you're not allowed to do tiltul min atzad. So it's not the same machloket, that's the point.
Adam baul al mitoch, אז שלום, רוצה להציל אותו לבוא.
I want to tell you something fascinating.
So you're putting something on the dead body and then you carry the dead body?
No, we didn't even say that. No. What? Minad Leika, we said everyone agrees you could put something on and then carry it. The question is, let's say you don't have that option. So it seems to be that what would come out according to Rav Yehuda ben Lakish is you could, even another option would be why? Because otherwise you might do kibui. So that's the kula.
It's still something to do with the afraid to lose the body completely.
I hear, enachanami.
הוא מפחד שהגופה תשרף לגמרי ולא יהיה לו מה להציל, לפחות יביא אותו לקבורה.
Exactly.
I don't understand what are we doing now? If there is gzera, shema yechabe or what?
So that's why it's not a gzera. It's a kula shema yechabe.
So you're allowed to carry him tiltul achar.
So that's what I'm saying. There is a discussion that Rishonim here, according to Rav Yehuda ben Lakish, is it actually you have to do tiltul min atzad, or could you actually take the body out so that you don't come to a problem of shema yechabe?
Right?
Exactly. Now I want to point something out. Tosfot says something fascinating. Later in the Masechta on Kuf Yud Zayin, the Gemara is going to say the exact opposite with money. The Gemara is going to say, the Gabe Mamon Amrinan, this is Tosfot, Amrinan Ipcha, Isharit Alei Atilech Buye. Tosfot says, the exact opposite is Paskin later in the Masechta, is if we allow you to take your money out, you're going to end up putting out the fire.
Huh?
Yes.
It's the exact opposite. You understand?
Yes.
In the psak for money, you're not allowed to take your money, because if we allow you to take your money, you might end up putting out the fire. Yes. And here according to Rav Yehuda ben Lakish, is you're allowed to take the body because otherwise you might end up putting out the fire. You hear how it's the exact opposite. So he says, what's the pshat? Hainu mishum she'ein mitzta'er al mamono kemo al meito. Very interesting thing I meant today. Maybe. Unfortunately, some people might not hold the same thing, but the kavod hamet that you have, or the honor for the deceased, that's something that would bother you to do kibui, versus if they let you take your money out, you'll actually end up extinguishing the fire.
It's reminding the story with Rav Yosefi, and the person going to his father's vura, and in the evening going with his friends, your girlfriends.
Very interesting thing. Anyways, the kids that we're saying is tiltul min atzad, shmei tiltul kuli alma. That's what we're saying.
אנשים נורמליים, עכשיו יש דלקה.
ברוך השם.
מה יציל את הכסף שיש לו בכספת, או ייקח את אבא שלו החוצה?
כן, הלוואי. Some people, their heads are on
אנשים נורמליים, בן אדם שלא נורמלי.
Let's finish up here. Rav Yehuda ben Shila, Rav Asi, Rav Yochanan, Rav Yochanan Paskin, Halacha, Rav Yehuda ben Lakish bemet. So it comes out like this. Rav Yehuda ben Lakish. Now, by the way, it's not the same as Reish Lakish.
This the son?
Reish Lakish is generations later. Reish Lakish is an Amorah. Rav Yehuda ben Lakish is a Tana. I'm just saying, meaning, you can't be the same Ben Lakish. That's what I'm pointing out. Because Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish is an Amorah, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish is a Tana. So maybe the same family, I don't know. But either way, that's his name. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. ריש לקיש, רבי שמעון בן לקיש. כן, ראש איך קוראים לו? הגנגסטרס, כן. קיצר, מתחילה עובדי עבודה זרה היינו. אוקיי, קיצר, פסקין like רבי יהודה בן לקיש באמת. So that means that you are allowed to take the dead body out from the dleika. In regards to the body in the sun, we're saying it's a machloket בקיצור. טלטול מן הצד.
לא צריך טלטול.
טלטול מן הצד. Oh, I'm saying that's a machlok in the Rishonim. That I'm not saying clearly. You could say that, I'm not saying that. יאללה, let's move on.
לפי טעמו של רבי יהודה בן לקיש, יש להתיר לטלטל את המת גם בטלטול גמור.
Okay, there you go. Who says that?
בהערות, במקרה שאין אפשרות אחרת להצילו מת לכאן.
No, but who does he quote saying that?
ראש ורן על פי רש"י.
Okay, so it's the Rishonim. Good.
רמב"ם, הלכות שבת.
Beautiful, so it's the Rishonim. Good. So we're coming out that
שלו בתוך שריפה, מה? הוא מסכן. גם לפחות אומר, לפחות הביא אותו לגבורה.
שומע.
מחובר, אחרי חודש שלום. הגוף.
Terrible.
אתה יודע מה? It's amazing. because לא עליכם, לא על אף אחד מסוים. אני זוכר, כשאימא שלי נפטרה, אז הגיעה חברת קדישה. ושמו אותה על מיטה, והיא נפטרה בתוך הבית. אז כששמו אותה על המיטה, היציאה מהחדר, המיטה הייתה גדולה, אז הוא העמיד את המיטה. אז מה קרה שהוא העמיד את המיטה?
הגוף זז.
הגוף. אז אני אומר לו, תיזהר, כאילו... לא, כאילו... ואני אומר, לא כואב לה.
אף שהיא מתה, אבל...
תבין, אבל... אתה מבין, יש... זה אפילו הכבוד, ראיתי אותה ככה נופלת, כאילו, אתה יודע, אבל... תבין מה אני אומר? אז אני אומר לו... אבל אני אומר לך,
אני גם זוכר, כן.
זה לא כואב לה, אבל בכל זאת זה לא נעים לראות את הגוף ככה, תבין.
It's deep rooted in our because it comes from Yiddishkeit, it comes from Judaism.
תבין, אתה אומר בן
We have
אדם...
such a sensitivity to...
איך מניחים את
זה לא סתם, זה לא סתם, זה בא מיהדות, meaning it's we have such... We're מבטל certain issuרי דרבנן because of כבוד המת.
יש לרב מאיר אליהו עושה, תתפלל, אתם צריכים להתפלל אפילו, the last piece of sand that they're going to put on his body.
זיבולה באתרייתא.
They will put it with כוונה טובה and with not מחלוקת and בעדינות.
בגלל זה שהמנהג הוא לא של אשכנזים, בטוח של אשכנזים, במסעדים, שלוקחים את השבל, לוקחים אותו ביד החלשה, וגם בהתחלה הופכים את השבל ולוקחים טיפה, לא את כל הכף, טרח. הופכים את השבל, ולוקחים טיפה, זה ממש, כן, גם זה בטח שזה. הרב היום אומר עד הכף האחרון של הזה,
זיבולה באתרייתא.
זיבולה באתרייתא, עד אז אדם לא יאמין בעצמו. אפילו ברגע שקוברים אותו שלא יאמין בעצמו, עד הרגעים האלה. שלא ייכנס בו גאווה, שלא ייכנס בו זה. עד הרגעים האלה.
אני זוכר, when my סבתא was נפטרה, I remember, that was really the only time I was at the ptira. I guess the only ptira that was really close to me also. I was the only one there at the ptira.
Where?
Here in Miami. My grandmother passed away.
In the house or the house?
In the house. She wasn't well for a while. She broke her hip and then it was bad. Kids, I was there and I remember it's such an experience to be there. The ptira, it's like, it's crazy. It's just, I remember like thinking to myself, it's the same but the exact opposite of being there when your wife has a baby. It's like the opposite experience. You feel, because it's like supernatural almost. It's something is happening here that's beyond description, beyond nature, beyond reality. It's not,
unbelievable.
And it's the opposite, mamash the opposite, but it's in a certain way. It's like something very.
I wasn't few.
Unfortunately,
my mother, my father.
Yeah.
I was in there.
But I also remember when the Cheva Kadisha came, they took they didn't. It was not on Shabbat. It was during the week, but first they covered, and then they wrapped it in a way that we could lift together to put it onto the stretcher that they were able to take out the door. But it's very gentle, very. That's what it is. Those are gaitos. Anyways, let's go right a little bit. It's not Hashem Shalom. We should only know. We shouldn't know such things. But there's halachot. Listen. Right, let's go. We said in the Mishnah, the oil. Remember we said you had a candle with oil. You're not allowed to benefit from the oil because it's not something that's prepared for use before Shabbat. Now, how are you not allowed to benefit from the oil? While it's burning or even after it burns? What do you say?
While it's burning, like we spoke about it, the fact that you cannot read next to the candle. You're not allowed to benefit from the oil. Does that mean while the fire is burning on Shabbat or even after it's gone out and there's oil left? Okay, so fine. We can all agree while it's burning, at least why not? Because if you take kibui, right? Simple as kibui. Va'od zehuktzeh lemitzvato. We can all understand that. What about after?
Oh, who holds that way? Rabbi Yehuda holds that way. What about Rabbi Shimon? So according to Rabbi Shimon, we're about to show this rule of the Mishnah is only while it's burning. But after the fire goes out, there's no problem of kibui. The problem of huktzeh mitzvato is not nogeya. 1 second, because there's no mitzvah anymore. It's burnt out. So if there's a little oil left, you could actually take from it.
I think so. We go to.
Let's see it inside.
But probably there will be another.
There's enough.
Gzera, Shema, you're going to change space. We spoke about this one with a good scent. So you're going to end up taking some for yourself in Shabbat.
No, but it's after. Tanu Avanan, let's see, Tanu Avanan. Says the Baita. Motar Hashemen Shebaner. If there's leftover oil after the candle burns out, Vishabakara, or in the plate, where it was burning. Issur. This is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds, again, it was huktzeh mitzvato, there's a kibui problem to take while it's burning. And on top of that, since at the time of Ben Hashmashot, it was huktzeh kiven de itkatzai ben hashmashot itkatzai lekule yoma. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Rabbi Shimon matir. Now Rabbi Shimon matir, let's be very clear. It means after the fire is burnt out, he doesn't hold of kiven de itkatzai, and therefore, since there is some use you could have for it on Shabbat, you want to put it in your Israeli salad, you're actually allowed to use it, unless by the time of Ben Hashmashot you dafka said, I'm not going to use it. But otherwise, you're actually allowed to use that motar. Now we're going to get more into that in a minute in the Breita.
Aren't you make it night?
What's that?
Aren't you making
it tonight? You don't make it tonight. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's only if you make it tonight le'epich. I'm not going to use it. But otherwise, if there is some use...
We spoke about it yesterday with El Bash.
Exactly, that's a good example.
If there is left over, it's all about the machshava.
Correct.
So...
But according to Rabbi Shimon, the definition of muktzeh is much more lenient. He's much more mekil. Exactly. Okay, Chaver, let's see the Mishnah now. Let's see. Now, here we're going to deal with two types of muktzeh ideas. Listen clear. Let's get this clear. We have what we've already discussed, which is muktzeh machmat mitzvah. Okay, so you have the oil, it's for the mitzvah. You have muktzeh machmat issur. There's an issur, it's burning. If you take some of that oil while it's burning, it's kibui. But you have another concept of muktzeh, which is called muktzeh machmat mi'us. Maze mi'us?
You just don't want it anymore.
It's disgusting. Something becomes muktzeh because it's disgusting. Now, it used to be the lamps they used for burning were cheres, and when those lamps got oil on it, it was used already, it became not pleasant. It became mi'us.
Like the smell of the heter.
I don't know how exactly, but you wouldn't want to use that for something else. You wouldn't want to use it anymore. So Rabbi Yehuda's shita, because again, remember, just the general rule is Rabbi Yehuda is much more inclusive. He's kolel muktzeh much more than Rabbi Shimon, which is limited. According to Rabbi Yehuda, muktzeh machmat mi'us is a problem. This cheres becomes muktzeh, and therefore, once that's been used already, you're not allowed to use that lantern, the cheres kli, for anything else. Now Rabbi Shimon is cholek. Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold a muktzeh machmat mi'us, and therefore, even if that vessel has been used and there's oil, you could still use it putting your sugar cubes in it. Whatever you want to use it on Shabbat, it's not a problem because he doesn't hold the muktzeh machmat mi'us. Let's see that inside. We're going to have 4 shitot in the Gemara, but let's see 2 in the Mishnah. It's a different story. That's about lighting candles bichlal. Right? Bichlal.
Okay, so
we're talking about after.
It can apply for different things.
This is a lot of application. Let's see Mishnah. Metaltelin ner chadash, you're allowed to move a new candle, avelo yashan, but not an old one. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now let's just get the clear shita. Why? What's going on here?
Because when it's yashan, it's the balat shemen. It's become disgusting.
We're not talking about while the fire's burning. While the fire's burning, you can't move it. Where it's not lit.
Sheyashan.
Chadash. Let's go with chadash first.
Used it already.
Chadash means it's clean cheres. So you didn't light it, and now you have this little lamp sitting on the. You want to put your sugar cubes inside of it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, mutar. There's no problem. Muktzeh machmat mi'us. But it's not muktzeh. But even if it wasn't lit, but it was already used, there was oil on it, at the time of Ben Hashmashot, it was muktzeh machmat mi'us. And since he holds kivan di itkatzai leben hashmashot itkatzai lekole yoma, so you can't use that yashan the whole day. Fine, good. Rabbi Shimon omer kol hanerot metaltelin. No, you are allowed to move those. Rabbi Shimon in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir, we'll get to it in a minute. Look in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol hanerot metaltelin. You are allowed to move it, chutz min haner hadolek b'Shabbat, unless it's still burning. Now, why? What's going on? He says like this. Even if it had oil on it, I don't hold a muktzeh machmat mi'us, so you could move that. That's not a problem. The problem would only be if it's still burning. Now, what's the problem if it's still burning? So you have a kibui problem, maybe it might go out. We'll see, the Gemara is going to say that's a potential issue. But the Gemara is ultimately going to say that's not the pshat in Rabbi Shimon. Let me tell you why. Because Rabbi Shimon holds, davar she'eno mitkaven is mutar. So if you move it, it might go out. That's davar she'eno mitkaven. It's not vadai going to go out.
Shabbat?
Ken. He's not. So the Gemara is going to say, so then why can't you move it? Because it's huktzeh lemitzvato. Means while the oil is burning, the oil is being used for a mitzvah, and then the kli is a basis for muktzeh. Memeli, you can't move it. But after the fire goes out, you should be allowed to move it. So the only time you're not allowed to move it, according to Rabbi Shimon, is while it's burning. No problem of muktzeh machmat mi'us, so it could be an old one. Only while it's burning, muktzeh lemitzvato. That's the point.
Very interesting. Because usually when you're moving the oil with the candle,
very careful.
No, it's...
Okay, so that's the chidush. Means the movement is not going to be a problem again because it might not go out. That's davar she'eno mitkaven.
We're not allowed even to read next to the Shema heter.
Here?
When you're moving it,
it has to be that it's not for sure going to go out. If it's vada going to go out, it's not davar she'eno mitkaven. Davar she'eno mitkaven means that it might go out.
Not even go out. Just to when you move it, when you metaltel. The whole thing shaking.
But when you לקרוא לאור הנר, your מחשבה, your focus is like, sometimes just doing things without intention, I read it and didn't read it. הראש שלך במקום אחר.
אבל לא נשמע, תמוה, כי פה אומר לך, לטלטל זה, לטלטל את הנר הדולק.
אתה לא יכול להזהיר אש ממקום בשבת.
זה מה שהוא אומר, לפי רבי שמעון, מותר לטלטל את הנר שהוא עדיין דולק בשבת.
Now look, we're going to have 4 shitot in the Braita. 2 of them we already had in the Mishnah.
כל הנרות מטלטלים.
חוץ מלנר הדולק בשבת.
Now that one you're not allowed, of course.
So who said yes?
No, Rabbi Shimon says you can't move it while it's lit.
אז מי אומר? אתה לקח או תלתים נר חדש?
No. You're not allowed to move it while it's lit.
What is it now? What is it now?
Yeah, but that's a different issue because there the oil is muktzeh. The oil is muktzeh. I was saying mitzad davar she'eno mitkaven, you would be allowed to move it. Aval mitzad she'oil is huktzeh lemitzvato, and now it's a basis for muktzeh, you're not allowed to move it while it's burning.
So none of them said you're allowed to move it while it's burning?
No one said that. No one holds like that. No, I was saying, אני הייתי אומר שלגבי העניין של דבר שאינו מתכוון, היה מותר לטלטל את זה. Because it's not for sure going to go out. That's the point.
אז למה לא אומרים את זה?
No, because again, it's huktzeh lemitzvato. It's a different problem, according to Rabbi Shimon. Let's see. Now we're going to have 4 shitot in the Braita. 2 of them we saw in the Mishnah, and these 2 are going to be new ones. Let's see the Gemara. It says the Gemara, Tanu Abanan. Metaltelin ner chadash, avalo yashan div Rabbi Yehuda. So again, we have Rabbi Yehuda's shita clear. The only thing you're allowed to move, rak, chadash, and also obviously not while it's lit. Chadash. Why? Because if it's chadash, it's not mius. It's not mius yet. It's not oil. And it's not lit, obviously, so you could move it, put your sugar cubes in it, no problem. Okay. Again, because if it was oil on
there is no use yet.
But let's be clear, if there was oil on it during Ben Hashmashot, so it's huktzeh, it's muktzeh machmat mi'us, and it's issur the whole day, exactly. Now, Rabbi Meir, pay attention. Rabbi Meir Omer, kol hanerot metaltelin, chutz min haner shehidliku bo b'Shabbat. Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to move them even if it's an old candle, an old wick, an old lantern, kli, and it had oil on it, unless it was lit by Ben Hashmashot. What's the pshat? So Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, kiven de itkatzai Ben Hashmashot itkatzai lekula yoma. He agrees to Rabbi Yehuda about that, but he argues on Rabbi Yehuda. He doesn't hold a muktzeh machmat mius. So therefore,
but it sounds more like
one second. So therefore, if it's an old cleave, even though there's oil on it, muktzeh machmat mius is not a problem So memela, as long as it wasn't lit during Ben Hashmashot, you'd be allowed to move it. But if it was lit during Ben Hashmashot, so it's huktzeh lemitzvato, then it's huktzeh lekule yoma, like Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Exactly. I'm saying mitzvah, it's also issur. But the point is that he agrees to the concept of muktzeh kivan deitkatzai leben hashmashot lekule yoma, but he's cholek on Rabbi Yehuda that he doesn't hold a muktzeh machmat mi'us. So therefore, if you have this kli that had oil on it from before, and it wasn't lit going into Shabbat, you could actually move it on Shabbat, not a problem. So let's put that in. Rabbi Meir holds, when is it mutar to move it?
Lo
afiru yashan, but not if it was lit ben hashmashot.
Shalom k'tza.
Okay. Aval lo in הדליקו
בין השמשות.
ובין השמשות.
צריך לתלות את זה על הקיר, אני חושב.
כן, I agree. There actually is something you could hook it up with. There's nails in the back. We could do it. That's Rabbi Meir's shita. Good. What?
מתן נדאג.
No, it's not. I think, yeah.
בוא תזמין, תגיד לנו, נזמין את הבורד. יש בורד אלקטרוני כזה.
I think there is something here.
What? Oh, maybe, yeah, okay.
יש בורד אלקטרוני כזה, גדול.
כן?
כמו של הבית ספר.
כן, why not?
תגיד לנו שיזמין.
It's very good. It's very good, why not? This is nice though, I don't mind it. Rabbi Shimon Omer, the third opinion is Rabbi Shimon, he says, this is the opinion from the Mishnah, chutz min haner hadolek b'Shabbat. He says like this.
מקל עוד יותר.
You're allowed to move it as long as it's not lit right now.
מקל עוד יותר.
As long as it's not lit right now.
אז מה ההבדל בינו לבין רבי מאיר?
אוקיי, הכל מותר, אסור, מותר.
אז הוא לא אוחז בין השמשות.
רק?
לא.
לא דולק.
רק עם הנר דולק.
רק עם כבוי.
הנר דולק.
אסור.
אסור. You see, he's much more
אז הוא עוד יותר מקל. אז הוא לא מוקצה.
He doesn't hold of כיוון דהתקצה לבין השמשות.
זה לא ישן.
He doesn't hold of...
ישן או חדש.
He doesn't hold of מוקצה מחמת מיוס. He doesn't hold of that. And he also holds it so you could move it if it's old and it has... The only problem would be if it's lit. Like we said, why is it a problem if it's lit? Because if it's lit, that's a mitzvah going on. And he does agree muktzeh machmat mitzvah. That would be a problem. So that you wouldn't be allowed to move. There's an additional thing of kibui, by the way. Be careful. But you would be allowed to move it. You're not allowed to take from it. But you would be allowed to move it according to Rabbi Shimon unless it was lit. That would be the only problem. Why? Because even though he doesn't agree with itkatzai ben hashmashot, he doesn't agree with muktzeh machmat mi'us, he does agree muktzeh machmat mitzvah. And then since it's lit right now, it's a mitzvah, you're not allowed to move it. By the way, after the fire goes out, there's no more mitzvah. You could take the oil, it's not a problem, like we said in the Mishnah.
So even
that's Rabbi Shimon.
So is prohibited to use it, it's a temporary.
Correct.
As long as it's like
correct.
Once it's off, you can use it.
Now let's go to Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Shimon, remember the one who went in the cave with him. So the Gemara says, before that I skipped. Kafta, now it's Rabbi Shimon, he says kafta, once the fire goes out, mutar l'taltela, you're allowed to move it. Means we said kafta, you're even allowed to enjoy the oil. You're allowed to move it because there's no more mitzvah and it's not muktzeh machmat mitzvah anymore. Now this line we're about to read, the Gemara is not going to understand, but we'll get to it tomorrow. אבל כוס וקערה והעששית.
דרך אגב, מחילה, הוא אומר פה, לדעת רבי שמעון גם נר שהיה דולק כניסת שבת, אינו אסור בטיטול, אלא בשעה שהוא דולק אסור לטלטלו, שמא יקבל את הנר בטלטולו.
So that's what Rashi here says. The Gemara later is going to say that's not the real reason. Rashi says that, but the Gemara later is going to say it's not the issue. No. That's right. Because the mitzvah. Muktzeh machmat mitzvah. No, so that's what Rashi here says, but that's not the pshat. We'll get to it later. Anyways. Aval kos v'ka'ara v'ashashit, says the Braita, a cup and a plate and a ashashit, Rashi learns is some sort of a glass lantern. Lo yezizem imkomo. Just don't get stuck on that. It's Lo yezizem imkomam. So those you're not allowed to move from their place, seemingly even if the fire has gone out. Now the Gemara later tomorrow we'll get to we're going to have to figure out exactly who's saying these words. B'pashtut, it sounds like Rabbi Shimon is saying it, but we're not going to understand if the fire's gone out. The same way you could move a candle, you should be allowed to move these things too. It sounds like it is, but the problem is, why can't you move it? He just said, once the fire goes out, you could. So we'll get to that tomorrow. I'm not going to focus on that now. Now this is the fourth shita. For Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Mistapek min aner hakava. He says the greatest chidush. You're even allowed to take from the oil. Kava doesn't mean it's actually been extinguished already. It means even while it's beginning to be extinguished, it means it's starting to sputter. You're even allowed to take oil from that. Or min hashemen amitaftef, and from the oil that's dripping out again while it's diminishing. Va'afilu b'sha'ah she'aner dolek, even while it is still lit. So Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon says the biggest chidush. He says you're allowed to be mistapek. You're allowed to enjoy the oil. Afilu min hashemen adolek. Again, as long as it's going out. As long as it's going out. Meaning it's zeyored. Bizman, I don't know if that's what you say.
Doech.
Doech?
Doech.
מה זה דורך?
דורך זה הולך ויורד.
How do you spell דורך?
ד' בעין כף.
זמן שהנר דורך. Fine. So he says the greatest chidush. Now, the Gemara immediately says, wait a second. How is that allowed?
You basically support the kibui.
It seems to be kibui. How is this bichlal allowed? He says you could even take from the oil while it's extinguishing, but it's still lit to some degree. So immediately, that's the end of the Braita.
זה כבר התחיל לדעוך, זה לא ש... You don't make the התחלה of the dicha, you don't take it and you cause it. It's already in the process of מתקבל.
Good. So Amar Abaye says, it's the end of the Braita, but Abaye says, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, Savala ka'avua b'chada, upalig alei b'chada. So he holds like Rabbi Shimon in one way, but he also argues on his father in another way. So he was in the cave with him also. Wow. So he was also a big man. Savala ka'avua b'chada delet le'muktzeh. He argues, he agrees with his father that he doesn't hold the muktzeh. Now this would mean two things. He would hold Ein muktzeh machmat mi'us, number one, and he also doesn't hold of kiven de itkatzai ben hashmashot itkatzai lekol hayoma. So therefore, even though it has oil on it, even though it was lit during ben hashmashot, you could still enjoy that oil. It doesn't become removed. So he agrees with Rabbi Shimon. But he argues his father holds only if the fire has gone out that you're allowed to enjoy that oil. Rabbi Shimon holds even if the fire has not gone out, but it's sputtering, it's starting to go out, you're already allowed to enjoy the oil.
אז האבא זה כמו רבי שמעון. זה רבי שמעון זה אבא?
זה אבא, כן.
אז זה מה שהוא אומר שזה אבא.
אז איך זה מותר? According to Leslie, how could it be mutar? It's sputtering, but still, there's a problem here, because still it's going to be a kibui first of all, right? How are you allowed to enjoy it? How is it allowed? So the kibui, according to Rabbi Shimon, is only where it's a healthy flame, a strong flame. Taking out oil makes it a shvacha flame, a weak flame. Here, where the flame is already sputtering, he says that's not a problem of kibui.
Didn't you say something with the
Chidush.
hand? Didn't you say something with the hand? That you do it with your hand, and it does it by itself. שאתה עושה את המלאכה ביד.
כן. כן.
No, we spoke about it with the Shema heter.
Yeah. Shema heter.
That you might stir the coals,
right?
Or that it's going to just do it by itself. So it start to flick. You not just be
I hear.
Mechabe by yourself. Okay. I just forgot like how you mentioned it.
Okay.
Miado.
Okay.
And here you're not mechabe by yourself.
אני מנסה לזכר מה אתה...
אתה יודע מה מדבר?
So it comes out like this. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon holds, first of all, there's no problem of muktzeh machmat mitzvah. He doesn't hold of that being an issue necessarily. And it's not a kibui issue. So it comes out like this, basically. Let's just put them in order here. The most machmir is Rabbi Yehuda. He holds the only thing you're allowed to move, only chadash. Let's say why? Because if it's not chadash, it became muktzeh ben hashmashot, and it's issur. Mios, mitzvah, all those things, it's all included in muktzeh. Rabbi Meir says, no, you could also use an old. He holds it katzai ben hashmashot. He does. But he doesn't hold a muktzeh machmat mi'us, and therefore you're allowed to move it even if, as long as it wasn't lit during ben. As long as it wasn't lit, meaning if it was lit, he does agree that there's a problem of ben hashmashot. As long as it's even if it's mi'us, you're allowed to move it. So he's adding one more thing that's mutar on top of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon holds even further. He says it's mutar unless now it's lit. Otherwise, you're allowed to move it because he doesn't have the expansive view of muktzeh like these shitot. And Rabbi Shimon takes it one step further, which is even while it's lit but it's going out, you're allowed to take from the oil. He doesn't look at that as being an issue of kibui. He doesn't hold of it being muktzeh machmat mitzvah. You're allowed to take from it. He's the most narrow definition of muktzeh, really.
Once the lights start to extinguish, זה לא נקרא חיבוי. חיבוי זה שהflame is real flame and you take it so...
Exactly. Okay, we're going to stop here, Chaver. There was a line that we didn't explain, which is Kos v'ka'ara v'ashashit lo yizim komam. That's going to be tomorrow. We'll talk about what exactly is going on. That's the kasha. Gemara is going to try to figure out. You think because it doesn't work with Rabbi Shimon. Because Rabbi Shimon said once the fire goes out, you can move it. So why is it different? Asking
כי זה לא כלי של חרס, כנראה השישית הייתה מסרוכית. הכלי של חרס זה המיוס. חייב להיות.
אבל רבי שמעון לא סובר מוקצה מחמת מיוס. So it's not a problem. Yalla, we're stopping a little more than halfway down with Darim with Aleph. Zat Hashem, Chaver.